not the land of Israel. Israel wasn't a land, it was a people. He said, non-covenant people here have greater faith than you covenant people do. I got news for you. You're wanting great faith, you can't even have it. You cannot have great faith. Great faith can only be had by people that don't have a covenant with God. You have a covenant. Luckily, you don't need great faith. All you need is faith the size of a grain of mustard seed. Why did they have great faith? Because they had no covenant, they had no right to call on God for anything. And Jesus said, wow, look at this faith. They don't even have a right. Myself, it would take more faith for me to go to Ross Perot. Most of you know who he was. Hope I'm not a prophet. It would take more faith for me to go to him and say, excuse me, would you give me, I don't know, $500,000? Than it would for me to go to my dad and say, you know, Dad, I need $10. It would take more faith to go to Ross Perot. Why? I have no relationship with him. You see, the centurion and Syrophoenician woman had great faith because they had no connection with God, no right to call on God, nothing to do with God. And he turned around to the Jews and said, man, you Jews, come on, you stand around talking about, we're the children of Abraham. We're not in bondage to any man. And they had Roman centurions standing around them right then, guarding them. And they were in bondage to Rome right then. They were so proud, they blinded themselves with it. They had great faith because they had no covenant with God. David had a covenant with God. He said, I'm going to win. He ran forward, killed Goliath. What happened? Then it says all of Israel jumped out from about what they were hiding behind and ran down the valley and chased the Philistines off. Well, now, doesn't that take a whole lot of courage? One little guy just goes and kills their champion. They turn and run, and now it's kind of like, hey, guys, I guess I might as well go chase them. They're all running anyway. And they chase them down. It only takes one person to turn a war. One person that'll stand up and run right in the middle of the lion's mouth and say, bless God, just like Luther said, here I stand. I'm not backing down. I'm standing here, hell or high water, as we say in Texas. I'm not backing down. And if you can be that person for your family, for your community, for your church, you can do it. And luckily, we have more than one person. If you'll join together, you know, y'all use the terms all the time. One can put 1,000 to flight, and 2, 10,000. Well, come on, do you believe it or are you just talking? It's time to put up or shut up. It's that simple. This stuff, see, if I didn't know this was real, I couldn't stand here and tell you this. But I know this is real. All I'm trying to do is urge you on. Grab your armor and run toward the giant. I don't care how scary he is. Run toward him. I guarantee you he'll be down before you get there because you're not fighting this battle yourself. All you got to do is show up and God will come on the scene. I'm telling you, I know what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about something that I haven't seen. I'm telling you about I'm not even preaching by faith, okay? I'm telling you what I've seen. I know what I know. It works. But you got to do it. Amen? Now, I had to say this to the last because I promised I would do it, and that was what the note was about. Okay? But I had to get this other stuff in because this is our last night here, and I know it's late, and I appreciate you so much for staying. I really do. One thing I want to tell you, I'm not given to a lot of dreams, visions, things like that. I've had a couple in my life that have seriously affected me. And I'm going to tell you at least one. There was two I'd like to tell you, but there's at least one I'm going to tell you. I was in a home where I lived when we started all this, and people were getting healed in my living room. My kids would come home at 11 o'clock at night, and we'd have people laid out on the floor and stuff going on, and they'd walk in and look at everybody laid around the floor, and they'd go, cool. And they'd go into their room because they were used to it. That's the way we do things. I started laughing the other day. We're sitting around the kitchen table, and this stuff goes on. Okay, go ahead, turn it over. And our family, we sit around talking about stuff like raising the dead and how to beat this disease and what we found out about this sickness and how it affects certain people. That's our kitchen talk, we sit around the table. And I stopped one day and pushed back and said, can you imagine what somebody would think if they were just listening to this conversation? We either are out there or we are just crazy, okay? But the fact is we get results. So we must just be out there, Like Brother Hagin says, out in the deep water, where all the blessings are. That's where the blessings are, out in the deep. And I'm blessed because I have a family that we can talk like that, and they don't think you're crazy, okay? But in this house, there was a long road, one way in, one way out kind of thing. And it was about 6:30 in the morning one day, and I was asleep, and I still don't know I don't know if I was asleep or what, but I got up out of bed. My wife woke up, and I just started walking down the hall, and she knew something was strange about it because she got up and followed me. And then she woke my daughter up. My daughter like this. And looking just like that. That's what they saw. They thought I was petting a dog that I saw or was dreaming or something. What was going on was when I walked out of my front yard, I could not see the grass because of people sitting on the grass, sitting around. They were dressed in every kind of clothing from all over the world, literally. The India type clothing, the African type clothing, all over the world, sitting there. The stench was unbearable. And it wasn't just a stench from a mass of people, it was a stench of disease, of rotted flesh. I can't describe it. And it's just awful. And as I walked out there, what I was doing is I was stepping over people and around people. I was patting them on the head and on the shoulder and telling them, I was stopping and saying, it'll be okay. It's going to be all right. You're going to be okay. And I could hear the people moaning and the sounds and the cries. And if you ever saw Jesus of Nazareth, that's kind of the way it was. And I walked on through there and I stopped. And I looked down the road and this ambulance backed in. They jumped out real quick, opened the doors, took out a stretcher, laid it on the side of the ground, on the side of the street, person on it. They jumped back in the ambulance, took off down the road. As soon as they pulled out, another one came, and it just kept coming and kept coming. Ambulance after ambulance after ambulance. People all up and down the road, all up and down my yard, just a mass of people. And I walked out in the middle of all this, and I could hardly catch my breath because of the stench, because it was awful. And I started crying, and I kept thinking, God, I can't get to them all. I can't reach them all. I can't get to them. God, I got to have help. I can't reach them. I can't do this. I have to have help. God, I got to have help. And by this time, I was crying so hard that I could hardly catch my breath. I mean, I was literally, gasping for breath, crying, and saying, God, I can't do this. I can't touch them all. I can't get to them. They're going to die. And I felt a hand on my shoulder from the back. And I didn't turn around, and to this day, I still, wished I had. And I'm thinking, who would I have seen? But I knew behind me was Jesus. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and it was like he whispered in my ear. And he said, now you know how I felt. Now you know why I ordained the 12. Now you know why I ordained the 70 others also. And now you know why I ordained you and my church to do the work, and they're not doing it. I need help. And I was just crying. I would pray that each one of you would have a visitation like that. Don't wait for it. But dear God, I wish you'd have one. Because from that day on, you can't stop. You can't back off because people are dying. And the church doesn't care. We don't care. If we cared, you'd be doing whatever you could. If it was your loved ones, you would do whatever you could to get them free, to stop the dying, to stop the disease. It is not a friend. It is an enemy that is killing, stealing, and destroying the life of people. And you say, well, my loved ones are all healthy. There was an old saying about the Holocaust. And he said in the beginning, they came after the Jews, and I didn't do anything because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came after the Catholics, and I didn't do anything because I wasn't Catholic. And then they came after this group, and I didn't do anything because I wasn't of that group. And finally, they came after me, and there was no one left to do anything.